Hi, everyone. Thank you for attending this discussion on tackling climate change in Massachusetts and the recent passage of the landmark Next Generation Roadmap. This event is one of several organized in Melrose to celebrate Earth Week, and we're really happy that you've joined us. My name is Martha Grover, and I'm the Sustainability Manager for the City of Melrose. We also have with us Senator Jason Lewis, Representative Kate Lipper-Garabedian, and Melrose Mayor Paul Brodeur. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So it's great to have you all here. I for one watched the back and forth between the legislature and Governor Baker with a lot of interest for a couple months earlier this year to see what would get cut and what would survive the negotiations. And thanks to the work of climate advocates and others who never let up, we ended up with a package that once again shows the Commonwealth to be a leader in fighting climate change. So for all of you listening in, the format for tonight is that we'll hear about what's in this Next Generation Roadmap and how it will impact us locally. We'll talk about what's on the docket for the next session currently underway, and then we'll take questions from all of you. So to get started, my first question is to you, Representative Lipper-Garabedian. The Next Generation Roadmap is chock full of great policy initiatives and programs. So what stands out for you? What were the highlights?
Thanks, Martha. Nice to be with everyone tonight. As you all know, I took office about a year ago in March 2020, and the COVID-19 pandemic necessarily interrupted a lot of legislative progress and process for countless bills. So it's a real testament to Massachusetts and the legislature that momentum on this bill did not waver. Instead, over the course of 8 months, I was able to vote on the bill 4 times, each vote a resounding yes. And of course, in that same time frame, evidence like California's record-setting fire year, the extreme winter storms in Texas just underscored the imperative that we take action now. So with a senator, I'm just so proud of the Commonwealth's bold new climate law that meets our moment and is the first major update to the 2008 Global Warming Solutions Act. In this district and in Melrose, addressing our climate crisis has been a top priority. And so this legislation, as you referenced, includes a multitude of important provisions to help us to take on this existential crisis. And just before I turn to some of the specifics of the bill, I do want to acknowledge the City of Melrose's leadership in focusing so intentionally in a mission-oriented way on the ways in which local government can lead in this space. We've seen it just in the last week over the course of Earth Week and all of the events that you put together. You're helping to create exemplars that inform state policy and certainly deepen my understanding of the issues. So I'm really grateful to Mayor Brodeur and Martha for your work here. And I'd also like to thank many residents in the district who are environmental advocates and experts and have served as resources to me when reviewing the climate policies. So let me just talk about a few of the provisions of the legislation, and it's quite a hefty bill, so I won't get into all of them, but as you referenced, it's a roadmap bill. So it sets a statewide net zero limit on greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, mandating emission limits every 5 years, as well as sublimits for transportation, buildings, and other sectors of the economy. And to help us get to this overarching goal, we increase the renewable portfolio standard by 3% each year from 2025 to 2029, which will result in us being 40% renewable energy by 2030. We create for the first time a greenhouse gas emission standard for municipal lighting plants, and both the senator and I have been in touch with Wakefield's light department during this time and as recently as last week. For renewable energy, we require an additional 2,400 megawatts of offshore wind, which increases our total authorization to 5,600 megawatts. We prioritize equitable access to state solar programs for low-income communities and provide solar incentives for businesses. We set benchmarks for the adoption of clean energy technologies, including electric vehicles, charging stations. Great work last week on the rollout of a number of pole-mounted charging stations here in Melrose, solar technology, energy storage, heat pumps, etc. One other thing I really am appreciative in the bill is codifying the concept of environmental justice, recognizing that the costs of climate change in terms of health and well-being are not borne equally across our state based on decisions historically about where we site certain plants, where we put down certain roads. And so we've defined environmental justice populations and provided tools and protections for affected neighborhoods. So I might pause there, and there's many other provisions I could discuss, but I'll see what questions people have, and the senator may also have some additional remarks on this bill.
Yeah, Senator Lewis, were there highlights of the bill that you'd like to share?
Thanks so much for moderating our conversation tonight, Martha. And it's great to be with my colleague, Rep. Lipper-Garabedian, and my former colleague in the legislature, now Mayor Brodeur, both of whom are leaders when it comes to environmental issues and climate change. So, this was really, I think, voting, as Rep. Lipper-Garabedian said multiple times, to move this bill forward and eventually to see it signed into law is really one of the highlights of my career in the state legislature, because it is such consequential legislation, for our communities, our region, our Commonwealth. And I also think it's going to be a blueprint nationally for a lot of other states, because it really puts Massachusetts, along with California, maybe a handful of other states, as really a role model for how to seriously and urgently, tackle climate change in a very comprehensive way, because this legislation tackles electrical energy generation, which we have tackled in prior bills as well. But it also really tries to go after other major sources of emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, in the transportation sector, in the building sector, and others. So, it was a significant achievement. It took several years of work within the legislature and working closely with all different stakeholders and advocates to eventually get it across the finish line. I'll just mention a few highlights, some of which are overlap with what Representative Lipper-Garabedian mentioned. But obviously, at the top level is setting this goal, a legally binding goal of net zero carbon emissions for our state by 2050, and that is very significant that that's now in law. And also alongside that, we have to reduce our gross emissions by at least 85% below 1990 levels. So that's also a very, very significant target. And we have to do that at least 50% below 1990 levels by 2030. We've heard President Biden speaking about this recently and setting a goal for the United States. This goal we've set in this law is more aggressive than what is being set or President Biden is proposing nationally. And then also having sublimits for the different sectors, for electric power, transportation, commercial heating and cooling, residential heating and cooling. That's also very significant, the first time we've ever put those into law, because again, it recognizes that we need to tackle emissions across all sectors in order to meet these goals. The bill, secondly, it doesn't just set goals that are legally binding, it also requires very detailed, comprehensive plans to be developed by the administration, and there has to be regular reporting to the public on how the state is doing in executing the plans and in meeting these targets. So we will all be able to see exactly how we are doing as we go forward. Third, I would echo what the representative mentioned in terms of very strong focus on environmental justice. And that is a significant new development. That's not something we had included in previous climate or environmental bills. So I'm very pleased that this bill makes a very strong stand around new tools and protections for environmental justice communities. Fourth highlight I would mention is, again, continuing to really make Massachusetts a leader when it comes to renewable energy, and in particular, offshore wind. This bill will authorize an additional bidding process for offshore wind development, and the total that we will now have authorized through several pieces of legislation is 5,600 megawatts. And that's a very significant amount of power. That's going to make Massachusetts, not just a national, but a global leader. And it also brings with it the enormous potential for job creation. For example, in Southeastern Mass, they're really ramping up for the significant new industry essentially that's being created, in Massachusetts to install the wind turbines and then to just bring the power onto land and then to distribute that power, across Massachusetts in the years to come. And then the last thing I wanted to mention was that as part of this package, we also incorporated a bill that I filed to update water and energy efficiency standards for household and commercial appliances. And this is great because it's a win-win. It's a win for the environment, using less power, energy, and water to run appliances, and it's also a win for consumers because it lowers their utility bills. And I want to specifically thank 2 Melrose residents who were instrumental in both developing this legislation and then in championing it through the legislative process and helping me to get this included into the climate bill. And they are Eugenia Gibbons, who is formerly with the Green Energy Consumers Alliance. So thank you, Eugenia. And also Charlie Harak with the National Consumer Law Center. And in closing, Eugenia and Charlie are great examples of the kind of local climate activists and just ordinary citizens who have been advocating for this kind of legislation for a long time and really held our feet to the fire to make sure that we never gave up and got this legislation, signed into law. So I really appreciate and thank all of our local residents and climate advocates and organizations for your work at the local level and also at the state level as well.
Thank you very much, both of you, for that overview and for the highlights. I'm just so excited to get some of this off and running. There's just so much that needs to happen, and curious to see the rules and the regulations and the policies start to come out of DOER over the next. It has to happen almost immediately. I think they've got some deadlines coming up in July. And on the offshore wind, I've heard that Massachusetts has some of the best offshore wind resource in the world because of the amount of wind and the shallow depths of the water. It makes it easy to build the offshore wind turbines. So I think that's just a great opportunity for us. So Mayor Brodeur, bring it home to Melrose. How does this impact our work?
Great question. It's funny, what you just said reminds me of kind of an earlier time of the debate when Massachusetts was described as the Saudi Arabia of wind. And that it's clever, but it's also true. And so there's a couple things we have to acknowledge, right? Global warming is real and we need to deal with it. And we've struggled to get there, as has the country and the world. And really, in some respects, the letter, I got some popped up there, that the momentum in certain respects came from the ground up. I don't mean this as a particularly political statement, but the federal government was really absent from leadership in this area. As a matter of fact, as Massachusetts moved very aggressively into offshore wind, the federal government over the last several years really dragged their feet about moving the process forward from a bureaucratic perspective. We literally couldn't get the federal government to approve permits to move some of these projects forward. So to the credit of the legislature, they've grown that commitment because there is so much pent up demand and need to make those things. I also want to keep in mind that something that Senator Lewis said, this is really about opportunity and jobs as well. The venture capital that has come into Massachusetts and invested in some of these projects and the jobs that it has created in Massachusetts have outstripped the traditional energy market. And that's a huge, huge thing because it points to a bright future. We've had a lot of doom and gloom about how this is going to ruin the economy and cost us jobs and competitiveness. And I think nothing's further from the truth. And Massachusetts has really taken a leadership role. The same thing with public health. We tend to think a lot, almost in silos, about global warming as an environmental issue, but it's a public health matter. Air quality, asthma rates, pollution, all adds up to issues that affect local quality of life across Massachusetts and across the country. So everything that is done helps us locally in ways like that. What does it mean to us? It means there's more opportunities. It means there's opportunity for subsidy, for investment. I'm very excited about the opportunity to adopt the municipal stretch code. For folks who don't know what that is, we have a building code here in Massachusetts, and over time, we have updated that code to recognize really, some of the most pro-environment or proactive steps we can take to make our buildings, our houses, energy efficient. And as you know, buildings are a huge source, particularly for heat and cooling, most of all, in terms of their energy usage and that draw. We have made some real great progress here in Melrose. I'm very proud of the work that's been done, certainly before me, starting in 2010, and even before that, probably, but when we became a green community and made some really terrific investments in people like Martha and in programs that can lead us to some really great things in addition to the public health and green energy progress. We've lowered our utility bills. I mean, that's just kind of a basic dollars and cents, big deal that helps every taxpayer in Melrose, regardless of how they might think about global warming or climate change. It's good business and it's good for us. Moving forward, we want to continue that work. We want to work towards electrification of our fleet when possible. We also need to work, quite frankly, on sustainability, which is why you, Martha, you used to be the energy person and now you're the sustainability person, because the issues are much broader and they're all interconnected. So that when we're fighting climate change, we also have to think about, there are some inevitabilities. So some things like tree canopies aren't just the beautification piece anymore. They're part of a combat global warming strategy. And this bill recognizes that. And again, as Kate and Jason said, and to their credit for being leaders in this, it moves Massachusetts back to the head of the pack. Imagine a future where the South Coast, which has struggled a bit over the last, several decades, really, has an opportunity to not just be a Massachusetts leader or U.S. leader, but a national leader. That doesn't stay within New Bedford or the South Coast. That goes all the way across Massachusetts. And those kind of investment, I think they're gonna spur our education system. They're gonna spur a lot of spin-off economic opportunities. It's a great position to be able to, as a municipal leader, to be able to take advantage of some of these opportunities.
Great, thank you very much. I agree with all of that. So Senator Lewis, we've got the roadmap now to address climate change. That's just one piece of the puzzle, the mitigation side, getting us all to net zero and all the pieces and components of that effort and the work that has to happen. What are you working on now? What's going on in the legislature this year?
So the work is never done, right? As we know, you celebrate for a day or so when you get some new accomplishment, and then you right back at work. And as comprehensive as this landmark climate bill is, there's still a lot of things that we need to get done. Last year, I teamed up with a fairly new state representative, Representative Michelle Socolo, who's from Lexington. She succeeded Jay Kaufman. Some of you may know, a very long time, wonderful representative from Lexington. And Representative Socolo and I founded a new caucus in the legislature called the Zero Waste Caucus. And Representative Lipper-Garabedian is an active member as well. And it's kind of modeled after, what's been happening in Melrose and in other communities. It's another good example of the state following the lead of, our local, what's happening in our municipalities. And our mission in the caucus is to reduce and eventually eliminate solid waste in Massachusetts. And we want to do that through legislative action, through state and local collaboration, through education, and through public outreach. Because the bottom line is that solid waste harms our environment. It's bad for public health. And also disposal is very costly to our municipalities, especially since the recycling market has collapsed with some changes in what China has done in recent years. So Representative Sokola and I also developed a new bill along with the Conservation Law Foundation. And it's a bill aimed at dramatically reducing single-use plastics. I think we all are well aware of the damage plastics cause to our environment, both on land and our marine environment. And so the bill would go after single-use plastic bags, polystyrene, plastic bottles, plastic straws, balloon releases, with a range of strategies that are tried and true, again, because they've been put in place at the local level. And many of them in Melrose, for example. So that's a bill I'm definitely a priority for me and for the caucus, and really hoping we'll make real progress this session on single-use plastics. The caucus is also championing several other important bills. One of them deals with extended producer responsibility. This is a bill that our colleague, Representative Mike Day, has filed. And that would be very significant. That basically will hold producers responsible for the waste that they generate, and not put all the burden on consumers and municipalities. And that will lead producers to make different decisions about how they package products, for example. Also, a third bill that we're championing is an update to the state's bottle bill. We know how effective the bottle bill has been, and we know it needs to be updated. Just briefly, beyond the work that I'm doing on the Zero Waste Caucus, I'm also excited to co-sponsor a number of wonderful bills that fellow senators and representatives have filed. There's dozens of great bills. I'm sure Representative Lipper-Garabedian will talk about some as well. But just to mention three, an act transitioning Massachusetts to clean electricity, heating, and transportation that would establish even more aggressive goals than the climate bill. And that would be getting us to 100% clean energy across all sectors in the decades to come. So I'm supporting that bill. Also, a bill called an Act Preserving Open Space in the Commonwealth. It's also known as the Public Lands Protection Act, or PLPA. And unfortunately, we almost got this across the finish line last session, but didn't quite make it. So that's on my priority list as well this session. And then lastly, I would mention an act to improve outdoor and indoor air quality for communities burdened by transportation pollution. It's particularly, again, it intersects a lot with environmental justice. And Senator Jalen has filed that bill along with some state representatives, and that's also certainly on my short list. So lots of bills that we'll be working on, but those are a few, I think worth mentioning. And just want to encourage folks who are listening and watching tonight to continue to stay active with statewide organizations like in the Environmental League of Massachusetts, Mass Climate Action Network, Sierra Club, whichever group you're part of, because that's a great way to stay up to date on what's happening with climate legislation and how to to be involved and to advocate for the bills that you're most passionate about.
Thank you for that. On the zero waste front, a lot of cities and towns are starting to look into organic composting programs. I know Melrose has a new environmental coordinator at our DPW, and that's one of the things she's already started to look into. I know some communities have passed some type of, put some programs into place. There are a lot of different ways to go about it, but I'd love to see that too. So Representative Lipper-Garabedian, what are your priorities for this session?
Sure. So that was really helpful to hear the senator list off every bill that I'm quite familiar with and am pleased to be supporting also. And, you know, in addition to being a member of the Zero Waste Caucus and very grateful for the senator for helping to spearhead that and serve as a co-chair, it's been a really nice group to join in terms of just being able to focus on sustainability practices and policies and meet with experts in the field to sort of talk through a lot of these challenges and potential solutions. Beyond that, I've also been named to the Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy Commission, so TUE. And at the end of last year, I made a professional New Year's resolution to learn more about energy because it just is at the intersection of so many of the things we're talking about tonight. So to be on TUE is very exciting to me, climate resiliency being a big issue in our district. So I've had the pleasure to date of meeting with the Energy and Environmental Affairs Secretary for the state. Last week, I joined the House Chair and other members to tour a battery energy storage system that helps reduce demand during critical peak times when electricity is most expensive and may have a higher environmental impact. And I'm really looking forward to serving on this committee where some of the bills that we're talking about tonight have been assigned and where we'll also just have an opportunity to engage on a lot of these issues. So for the current session, maybe I'll just mention a few of the bills that I'll be championing. You know, there are all these important themes that we've discussed tonight with respect to zero waste, consumer protection, public health, transportation, transformation, toxic chemical reduction, and job creation. On that last one, you know, one thing that was mentioned by the mayor and the senator was how there's also, you know, a real workforce development piece to this. And in fact, the new law does establish a $12 million annual funding for the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center that's going to create pathways to clean energy jobs for folks who have been displaced and for others in important communities. A bill that's been filed this year would similarly establish a green infrastructure fund. It would raise these funds by a bonding program, as well as eliminating a pollution fee loophole that's used by out-of-state fossil fuel importers. And that would support investments in transit, housing, renewable energy, and research to help reduce emissions. And a significant amount of attention in the bill is paid to workforce development and green jobs for displaced workers. Another bill that comes to mind that's in the zero waste realm is one that would create a commission to develop incentives and policies within the state to promote robust and comprehensive markets for waste reduction through the support of reuse, repurposing, refilling, and recycling industries. So this commission would help to address this growing waste issue that is really burdening our cities and towns, what the senator mentioned a little bit ago. I think the bottle bill is one that I'll just emphasize again. I know the senator spoke to this. We've seen that bottle deposits are really an effective strategy for recycling beverage containers. And so much of what we try to recycle in curbside programs ends up not being recyclable because of contamination. So our bottle bill hasn't been updated since it became a law 40 years ago. And this bill would expand the deposit to cover water bottles, nips, which we've talked about at some length in Melrose, for example, on the city council, vitamin drinks and other containers. It would also raise the deposit from 5 to 10 cents. Maybe one more that I'll mention, what I appreciate about more than 6,000 bills that have been filed is that you can find bills that are quite comprehensive in scope and some that are more targeted, but really present an interesting concept. So one example would be a pilot program related to how we raise funds for safe and reliable transportation. So the pilot program would be done with volunteers, and it would assess owners of motor vehicles a user fee based on the number of miles traveled on roads in the state as a possible alternative to fuel taxes. So you'll have about at least 1,000 volunteers in the Commonwealth who represent drivers of trucks, passenger and commercial vehicles, and they'll have on the board vehicle mileage counting equipment added to their vehicles. And again, this is all done through volunteers. And this program would allow us to test the reliability and ease of use and cost of this type of program and enable MassDOT or DOT to refund these volunteers the fuel taxes they do pay or otherwise compensate them. So those are a few to give you a sense of the kinds of work that's going to be continuing in this session, and I'll continue to champion these bills as well as those associated with costs related to municipal recycling, building codes, a climate resilient MBTA, protecting electric ratepayers, something we've talked about in the past. So that's a quick rundown.
It's a long rundown. It's going to be a busy busy session. So, Mayor Brodeur, I'd like to find out, or maybe now's an opportunity to talk about what you'd like to see the state legislature or Governor Baker
All right, I get my
do
plugs
in
in.
this session.
Speaking of long list, you guys have touched on so much that is important to the city. Solid waste disposal is a huge deal. Most cities and towns in the Commonwealth entered into waste disposal contracts that really, quite frankly, we made money on recycling. That has turned 180 degrees. And as those contracts come up for renewal, they really present something of a fiscal cliff for cities and towns that are going to they're going to have to figure out, with no secondary market as it stands right now, plus the ever increasing cost and scarcity of landfill space. That's a real big deal. And it's a big deal that touches every single person in Melrose. I would love to see semi-parochial concern. I know you folks both talked about this a lot, but electrification of the commuter rail. It allows for better service, more frequent service, and is obviously a much cleaner and, quite frankly, quieter way of transporting folks throughout Greater Boston. It's not that we need to, the reach. We really have to think about regional commuting patterns, and we have hopefully not fallen asleep at the switch, in the sense that commuting right now is in a weird hiatus, right, because of the pandemic. But we really risk, when the economy comes back, which we all know it will, are we going to completely choke off our lines, or, quite frankly, are folks that were great public transportation users, now put off by that? They've missed the T. They've figured out other ways to get to work. Are they going to continue to use less efficient ways to get to work? Or are they going to come back to public transportation? To the extent we can, maintain and improve and certainly electrify that service, it's going to mean great things for the community. Another thing I would say, this is a very kind of broad statement. I know you're both working on this. Certainly, energy efficiency is a place where Massachusetts has always led. Those investments pay off. They're probably the cheapest, most effective way for us to improve our energy future in some respects. And I'll geek out a little bit. Load shaving, a huge deal. If that can be incentivized, in addition to incentivizing creation of microgrids, we'll have a more resilient grid. That is certainly terrific. And as you build policies into the future, in order to hit some of the numbers, some of those targets that we want to hit, we have to make sure that folks that might not be, quite frankly, as well off can access those kind of benefits, like weatherization. I'll use an example of a great program that I took advantage of just recently. I now have solar hot water. It's tremendous. It's like boiling level. Folks don't need to be cynical about, oh, is it really going to work? It is. You got to be careful. Let's put it that way. But, there's significant capital costs. And if you have, it's great to advocate for this stuff, but if you literally can't afford it, or if we're offering, some kind of a tax credit, well, if you don't pay taxes, you might not be able to access that benefit. And in order to hit those goals, we need for everyone to be able to come along for the ride. So those kind of things will make, all residents in Melrose and across the Commonwealth be able to participate. And but before we go to questions, I do want, we've talked a lot about some of the groups and the residents that have really moved the needle on this, that have been at the table for a long time. But I really want to give a shout out to our young people. We have seen our kids lead, and not just, I don't mean just high school kids, kids throughout the Commonwealth, a lot of them right here in Melrose, some of them right in Martha Grover's home, quite frankly. And they are moving the needle in ways. Sometimes we lead and sometimes we get led, right? And with things like with gun safety and with climate, we are seeing young people demand change. And if we don't follow their lead, we're going to be out of jobs, and B, we're not going to make the kind of progress we need to make on climate. So kudos to those kids. Keep it coming. It's been great.
I totally agree with you about following certain people's lead, including your own children when they have great ideas. And anyway, before we go on to questions, Senator Lewis or Rep. Lipper-Garabedian, is there anything else you wanted to comment on? Or
I just wanted to lift up what the mayor said about that. As we do this work going forward, we do have to always keep in mind how we make it accessible and available to everyone. Like, for example, somebody just reached out to me the other day when I posted on social media about, the installation of the new pole-mounted EV chargers in Melrose. And Melrose is the first city in the entire East Coast to deploy this technology, and it's wonderful. And somebody reached out and said, but how do we make electric vehicles available to everybody? Because they're still too expensive. And that's a great example. We need to be constantly thinking about how do we make these technologies, whether it's weatherizing, your home, whether it's switching your heating to using heat pumps rather than gas heat, whether it's, hybrid or electric vehicles. We've got to have in place initiatives and programs to make them accessible to everybody.
Yes, I just had that same question from a resident this afternoon. How are we going to pay for this transition to electrification? Because it is expensive, and it's going to require a lot of subsidies and programs to make it happen for everyone. So we have our first question, which is on this very topic. We're worried about the affordability of new electric cars. Will we eventually have to give up our gas-powered cars because of new climate policy? This is from Jeannie and Al Boland. Who would like to take that one?
I can start because this is exactly what we were just just starting to talk about. So that it's a perfectly timed question from the Bolands, and unfortunately, there's no easy answers here, because it is true that new technology typically is more expensive when it first comes on the market. What we have been doing at the state level is we do provide money through, we've provided it through the state budget and through some other programs to provide rebates, to people. So when you either buy or lease an electric vehicle, you qualify for a state rebate, which does help lower the cost. Also, there's actually a very significant federal tax credit that folks can also qualify for. So that's thanks to the work of Congress. But that helps only so much. It still is a significant expense. So I think coming up with new solutions, things like car sharing, and obviously as we deploy more chargers and as more people are able to afford and buy or lease electric vehicles, or more electric vehicle fleets, the price of the vehicles will come down as well. We're going to drive that down. So the faster we can get the infrastructure out there and the more we can support kind of the early adopters, the faster we will drive the cost down for everybody. And then it will be no different than buying, or leasing, traditional gas powered vehicles.
Right. I would echo all of that and say this question sort of drives at how there are multiple ways in which we're moving to a new normal, where we are moving toward electrification. So part of it is around what can government policy do to support these shifts, because they're so important for our long-term goals. So things like the rebates, things like making infrastructure possible to make people feel confident that this is an option for them for longer travel, for example. There's also just the science. So, as we set policy in place and these goals, it encourages research and development to help us meet them. And it sort of spurs that level of innovation, which also then drives, the private actors in the marketplace, where we're seeing every day a new car company announcing that it plans to go fully electric by a certain time. I think maybe Honda came out last week with something along these lines, right? So all of these interplaying together will necessarily have to make it manageable for the average family, including someone like yours truly, who is still driving a car she purchased, over 10 years ago. But I think the state recognizes that what's important is to try to, at the moment in time where your car is no longer the one that you want and you're ready to replace it with something else. And for everyone, that's different. Some people, I think, are less inclined to keep a car running for 10 years. But, at that point, we want to try to ensure that state policy, that, market actors are creating an option for you that makes it reasonable to really move toward an electric option.
If I could put a little bit of that, I want folks to understand. Now that I'm in management world, I've become cheap, right? I mean, if you really have to watch every penny and watch every dollar. And when we look at things like fleet investments, you have to take a long view, because a couple of things. Well, first of all, we've seen in most clean energy sectors dramatic drops in price as the market grows, as you get economies of scale, as the research kind of responds to the marketplace. But there's also kind of you start to think about lifespan costs, and the startup cost of purchasing an electric might be a little bit higher than the base price of whatever gas powered vehicle you're going to buy. But over time, because of fuel savings and, quite frankly, maintenance savings, because electric vehicles are much easier to maintain over the life of the projected lifespan of the gas versus electric, it's very competitive. Now, I get it that might be, if you got to go out and buy a car tomorrow, you don't want to be hearing, well, I'll tell you what, 10 years down the road, you're going to be in the black on this. That's where there's still work to be done. But it's also, you got to lead the market a little bit. That's why these our pole mounted charging is so important, because it gives people a comfort level with the technology. They don't get afraid of being stranded necessarily as more people adopt, the market grows. But as both Kate and Jason mentioned, it's tough to get off the ground, and we very much appreciate the state and now federal support for moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I would just add, as the owner of an EV, I've had mine for 4 years, and I think I have to rotate the tires and fill the wiper fluid, and that's pretty much it for maintenance. So that's definitely true. And for anybody who's shopping or interested in looking at the market right now, there are some great deals on used electric vehicles, because a lot of electric vehicle owners are leasing the cars, waiting for the next new thing. And so they want to just own it or lease it for 3 years. So there's some really good deals. And the Green Energy Consumers Alliance has a fantastic Drive Green program that they have discounts through local dealerships on certain makes and models. So if you just search Green Energy Consumers Alliance, they're a nonprofit, and they have this great program called Drive Green. So I think we're ready for the next question. Ellen Katz wants to know, what funding resources does the new climate law bring to support local governments and their climate initiatives? Great question, Ellen. Senator Lewis or Rep. Lipper-Garabedian, either one of you have anything to add to that in response?
I mean, I can start, but, I think it would be nice to, build off of each other. So there is, for example, this commitment to the workforce development clean energy center that I mentioned. That's really related to workforce development, but so not directly to municipalities. I think in large part, some of this is the complementary work we do on our annual budget every year. So we have identified and expanded the responsibilities for some of our state agencies that are granting authorities to municipalities to oversee any number of programs that support really important, employees at the municipal level, or capital projects that occur. So, in the House Ways and Means budget that we are deliberating on and debating this week, I'm kind of looking at my other screen to see if I'm going to be called back into session for some votes. you'll see expanded authorized directed funding to the different EEA agencies that are responsible for carrying out the climate bill responsibilities, right? And so as Ellen probably knows from her important work on Ped Bike, where we've gotten some really great state grants over the course of the last year to do some innovative things, we're going to see we've expanded the responsibilities, as you were mentioning, Martha, of a number of state agencies that now need to issue new rules and regulations and put out policies. And part of that is going to dictate how they are then supporting municipalities in meeting many of the goals that are set out in the law.
The only thing I would add, and just to clarify, I think this as comprehensive as the climate bill is, it is really a policy bill. So it's not so much a funding or an appropriations bill. So as Representative Lipper-Garabedian was pointing out, there are really sort of other mechanisms through the state budget or through existing programs like the Green Communities program, and the Safe Streets, Complete Streets program, and others that provide money directly to cities and towns and community organizations for doing this work at the local level. That said, I think we all recognize that that's helpful and great, but not sufficient. And particularly as you look at what we're expecting to be the impact of climate change, rising sea levels, more severe flooding and weather events in the decades to come, we all understand we've got to do more around resilience at the municipal level. So there were some really good proposals last session around creating a very significant funding stream for municipalities to do this kind of work, flood mitigation work. That unfortunately got a little bit sidelined because of the focus on the climate bill, but I do think that will get renewed attention this session. The governor's been very supportive. Many legislators are as well. The main thing we have to figure out is what the funding source is in order to do that. But I think that will be a priority as well, so that there is more money available for both cities and towns as well as state agencies, to do climate mitigation and resilience work in the years to come.
I tell you, the resources are super important. And I know that the House and Senate last session had a couple of different ways of delivering really about $1 billion to local cities and towns for climate and resiliency. And the good news for Melrose is that because we have been doing this work and been doing it for a long time, quite frankly, work that predates my service as mayor, so that we are ready, willing, and able to take advantage of these opportunities as they come along. So, we are very much ahead of the game in terms of our net zero planning, and looking forward to that coming to fruition. We've done a lot of work on municipal resilience, kind of the twin pillars of the policies we want to pursue moving forward. So the infrastructure is there. I don't want to say shovel ready. That's not exactly where we're at, but we are ready to take advantage of resources as they come our way, for sure.
Yeah, and I would just echo that as as a municipal vulnerability preparedness designated community. We were in the first round. The program is way oversubscribed. They get 140 applications and only have enough funding for 30 to 35 grant projects to deal with resilience annually. So among my cohort, there's a lot of interest in increasing that bucket to do more resilience work. We have another great question that I'm gonna give to Paul to answer if you can. We have a great resource right here, in a lot of communities do in these vocational school systems. A lot of students in that system who are looking at auto mechanics, but don't realize that there are other paths and other, where the next big thing is going to be. And so how do we work with vocational schools to train the workers for the future?
That is a terrific question. And in certain respects, I will defer to Senator Lewis. When we were in the legislature together co-chairing labor and workforce development, we were trying to move a significant vocational school reform bill to do things like make sure that the programming that is offered is in line with essentially with regional employer needs. A simple example like auto mechanics. Modern auto mechanics is not ripping out the carburetor, points and plugs. You got to be a computer savvy tech person to work in that industry. And Lord knows, with the advent of electric vehicles, with the advent of different models of HVAC, it's part of where those workforce opportunities are. And some of them not only can be, but have to be supported through vocational school programs.
I would totally agree. This is a great opportunity, and Representative Lipper-Garabedian stepped in where Mayor Brodeur left off, and she and I actually are co-sponsoring legislation in this area, actually, around ways to further expand and strengthen vocational technical education, because it provides great opportunities and career paths for young people, who may want to go on to college, but may not want to go that way and want to go a different path. So what we're trying to do is make sure that they're exposed, to a lot of alternatives, and the clean energy sector, whether that's in weatherization, energy efficiency, the whole discussion we had earlier about all the jobs being created in wind and offshore wind, is a tremendous opportunity for jobs, and not just jobs, but career development and career paths, that are going to be high paid, good careers. So we're absolutely, many of our vocational schools understand this already, and are starting to offer programs in this area. And we're definitely going to be looking for ways to support and expand that. I think the representative mentioned the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, and they do a variety of work in the space of workforce development, job training, grants, things of that nature. So it makes perfect sense for our state to be a leader in this area.
Yeah, I'll just echo what the mayor and the senator have shared on this point, and also just recognize that there is a lot of work going on in the vocational technical education space that has been going on for a while. It's sort of had a rebirth of attention at the state level and also the federal level, where we're really recognizing that a lot of the careers that these schools prepare students for are high paying and really high satisfying. So one thing that I've seen a lot of work done in my time at the Executive Office of Education in my previous role was an intentional work to really connect voc tech schools with workforce groups at a regional level to talk about where we could see job growth and where there was going to be demand for new employees. So certainly, if we're now the South Shore is aware, that we're investing in more wind, and that's also a huge priority in the House Ways and Means bill that just got released this week. I would expect that all of our vocational technical schools are, taking stock of that, talking with their workforce groups, chambers of commerce, and so forth, to think about programming in this space.
All right. Thank you for that. So our next question is asking about why electric companies, I'm assuming they mean utilities, are not directly involved with solar programs, solar installations, that a lot of the solar companies are from out of state and they use third parties for installation. Anybody want to take that one on?
I'll start, but you'll have to finish because you are the expert here. I think part of it has to do with the incredibly complex way our whole system works in terms of, you turn the switch and the light goes on, and that's what you care about as a consumer. But if you take a look at your bill, at your electric bill, you're going to see a bunch of different charges. Basically, there's two different pieces to your electric bill. There's the generation piece, the actual power. Someone generates the power, they get paid for that. And then there is National Grid, which is a utility, but doesn't really generate power anymore. They are just a transmitter or a deliverer. So that is kind of their main structure. As to why, a lot of the marketplace seems to be, out-of-state companies with third market installers. Martha, I don't know if you have a little bit more of a insight on that than perhaps we do.
Well, there is a robust community of local solar installers, companies that do it. I mean, that's one of the areas of major workforce development and growth in our state in the last several years. What Melrose has done is we had a program back in 2011, Solarize Melrose, where we connected Melrosians with a local installer. But since then, what we do is we refer people to a website called energysage.com. And on that website, you can put in the specifics of your house, your energy usage, where your address, etc. And you can get quotes from vetted installers, local installers. And you can get quotes that are both lease and outright purchase, that you can compare them side by side. It's a great resource with lots of consumer information there. Let's take the next question. I think it has to do with, Tom, you want to put the question from Jeremy. Are there pieces in the legislation that help municipalities set up an electricity aggregation program like we have in Melrose? And I'm not aware of any, because the legislation that makes an aggregation program possible was actually part of the restructuring legislation back from 1990. So it's been on the books for a number of years. It's just that in recent years, a number of communities like Melrose, they call us the pioneer, used the aggregation program as a tool to increase the amount of renewable energy that cities are investing in. So if any of you want to say more about that program, feel free.
No, I would just add, again, credit to you, Martha, and Melrose for being a pioneer in this area. I've since, in my district, seen Winchester do it, and I believe Rep. Lipper-Garabedian and I were talking to folks in Wakefield just last week, and they're also actively working on it. So it's great to see it's getting expanded interest in it. It's a great way to allow residents to to make a decision to go to invest more in getting their power from renewable sources, up to 100% from renewable sources, which is a great way for consumers to make a difference.
So time for a plug, and that is Melrose is a municipal aggregation community. And for folks who don't know what that means, I mean, Martha is the expert and can explain it. But what I want to stress is that there are different tiers. There are 3 different tiers in the Melrose program. And if you have the means to make the investment that Senator Lewis made, you can opt in. And it's not a huge, I'm very sensitive to price, believe me. It's not a huge dollar difference, but you can, in fact, as part of the municipal aggregation program, opt in. You have to make the choice to move up to 100% renewable. We're hoping to get, as part of our Earth Week programming here, we're trying to get 100 people in Melrose to commit to opting up to 100%. It's a great way, that phrase, think globally, act locally. This is a great way to be able to do that. And the good news, it's very easy. It's not very bureaucratic. I did it last week, and it took me about 5 minutes. So I highly recommend it. If you have the means to opt up, please do.
So I can just report that as of today, we're at 93.
You're kidding.
Melrose residents who have opted up to 100%. That's
Beautiful.
You can go to mcp.cityofmelrose.org and you can enroll and opt up right there. So I think we have time for one more question so we can wrap up. People have other engagements and the session's still going on for Rep. Lipper-Garabedian. Shiva Barton has a question. Is there any plan for incentivizing putting solar panels over dead space, such as over commuter rail tracks instead of over farmland or other open space? Does anybody? I can say one thing, that in the current incentives, that's called the Smart Solar Incentive Program, there are incentives and disincentives for putting solar over green space or on existing green space or removing trees, that kind of thing. And I know that when you say the commuter rail, I think that's a great idea. We were involved in a potential project, hasn't happened yet, to put solar over the parking lot at the MBTA over Oak Grove. I think that they moved on to some other construction projects there right now, but I think that might still be in play. And those are great opportunities for solar carports, providing shade, protection from snow and rain, etc., over parking lots or other open spaces that are used for other things. Did anybody want to add anything else to that?
No, I would just, that was great. I would just echo, those are definitely the places we would ideally like to, expand solar, is in those types of locations, and rooftop, of course, and not obviously taking green space or open space. So
Yeah.
That's definitely where we want to see the expansion in solar capacity.
Yeah. Well, this has been great. It's been great to talk with all three of you and hear your thoughts. Thank you very much for your time and for joining us, everyone who listened in and asked great questions. And if you have questions, please contact any of us, Mayor Brodeur, Representative Lipper-Garabedian, Senator Lewis, and we'd be happy to help you as usual. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a
Great
day.
job with the climate. Great job on the climate
everybody.
law, you guys.
Yep.
Exceptional.
Thank you very much for your
Exceptional
work
achievement.
on our behalf.
Thank you.